Hello and happy Sunday.
Happy Sunday, one and all.
Welcome to the Two Mats podcast, brought to you by the subscribers of the New European newspaper.
God bless them all.
Bless them all.
Bless them.
And there's lots of them to
and
bless.
they're growing in number.
They are indeed.
Lots of blessing going on there.
And we're growing faster than any news title in the UK. Which
Profitable too.
Profitable as well. Imagine that, a new
Profitable
media
startup. A startup that's profitable.
Actually making money.
Yeah.
Extraordinary. And it all gets invested into our journalism, so it's a good thing.
Yeah.
Let's kick off. Jan North asks, hi guys, love the paper, enjoy the podcast. Is there a delineation there? She loves the paper, but she only enjoys the podcast.
I don't know. I think we need to discuss that further.
And it might be Jan. It might be a Jan or a Jan. I don't know.
Yeah, we don't know.
So
we don't know.
Anyway. Hi guys, love the paper, enjoy the podcast, but I was disappointed with your section on Starmer's response to Trump. We're seeing a coup, says Timothy Snyder, as we discussed in our
Thursday podcast
on Thursday, in the largest, most powerful country in the world. It's unprecedented. Seemed worthy of a little more analytical thought than the trite Starmer needs to grow a pair mantra. Am I being unreasonable?
Well, I mean, obviously there's more you can say than Starmer needs to grow a pair, but I still think that's where you end up after the analysis, which is that, look, this is now, there is a pattern of behaviour emerging here, which is that, and it's going to get worse, which is that every time Trump does something outrageous, Westminster journalists ask Keir Starmer or a member of the cabinet, what do you think? And they say just enough to put a little bit of space between themselves and the White House, but not enough to make it clear that they think he's completely crazy. And I think that the problem with that is that really Trump has now cut loose the rest of the world, as we were saying on Thursday. And Starmer in particular is going to have to give a lot more thought than he is to what role he and Britain plays in a Europe that has essentially been abandoned.
Yeah.
And part of that, and a significant part, will be, okay, thanks for nothing. Yeah. Because we are, and one of the many crises that the return of Donald Trump has ignited is that Europe isn't ready for the role it's being asked to play. And I think that one way to reframe it slightly positively is that there's an opportunity here for Britain to renew its ties with the EU, sort of by praxis, by action, because we now have an urgent situation where we have to form a bloc within or without the formal institutions of the EU, because America simply isn't ready to play its role. So that will, I'm afraid, involve Starmer, to coin a phrase, growing a pair.
Yeah, I think there is a simplistic binary argument about, does Starmer turn to the US for fear of upsetting Trump and therefore deny any kind of rapprochement with the European Union, or does he try and re-engage with the European Union in the knowledge that Trump hates the European Union and that's going to piss him off? I don't think it's that binary, but there are definite actual situations on the horizon.
Yes.
The biggest one of all being whatever peace is negotiated in Ukraine and Russia, where there is going to be an absolute need for the UK to play a huge part in the European Union, or the defence of Europe.
Well, we're
going to have to have troops on a peace line.
This is absolutely. I mean, this is the sort of two steps ahead prospect, which I think every person in Britain should be thinking about very carefully, which is, if this goes the way it's going to go, it looks like it's going to go, within 18 months, in theory at least, there will be British boots on the ground.
Yeah.
Now, I'm not sure anyone thought that was going to happen when Putin invaded Ukraine.
And by the way, Matt, that is going to last not just years, but decades.
I mean,
it's going to be like Nicosia and the Green Wall.
It has the makings of a sort of Korea split, or indeed Berlin. So it's no small matter. And in that context, to your point, I mean, Starmer has to grow a pair, and he has to say to Trump or whoever it is who's because at the moment it appears to be, and things may change quickly, but it appears to be a stitch up between Trump and Vladimir Putin, which I would say is suboptimal. And the reason for that is that Trump likes strong men and doesn't care about anyone else.
Yeah.
And he certainly doesn't think of Starmer as a strong man. And I'm not saying that Starmer should suddenly, try and model himself on Modi or Berlusconi on Orban. But I do think he needs to consider his situation in this on a geopolitical level.
I think it's interesting about the strongmen idea, and I think the more I think about it, and our conversation on Thursday was very helpful for me in my thinking on this, is that it's less about the strength, it's more about the capacity to do a deal with somebody.
Oh yes.
And that's why when Trump looks at Zelensky and he looks at Putin, he said Zelensky can't do me a deal, but Putin can.
Well, except he can give him resources, and this is and mineral resources, and this was again what was so shocking about the initial account of his long phone call with Putin was that Trump is explicitly, not even privately, but explicitly saying he wants recompense for all the money that America has ploughed into Ukraine. So you're right. Everything is seen in terms of
transaction
deals, and he sees NATO. He sees entirely as a deal and one he doesn't like.
And Jan, in case you do doubt our kind of analytical prowess, please read Matt Dancona's cover story in this week's New European, which is extensive and brilliantly argued about what's going on in the United States. And by the way, entertainingly argue. I always learn stuff when I read your pieces, which is it's never just polemic. It's always educational. It's great.
Oh, you're very kind. Thank you.
Next question, please.
Should Yvette Cooper's video nasty, quite right too, showing a failed asylum seeker being manhandled aboard a plane be seen as the absolute last straw for people who thought last July that they were voting for a complete reset away from the performative malevolence of the Tories? Pete and Derbyshire. Well, we felt that, didn't we, Matt?
Absolutely. I mean, honestly, when someone says, do you remember Theresa May's hostile state? Let's do it worse.
The vans.
Let's do it, but worse. You kind of think, is this really what the Labour Party's central values are these days? Is there not a gravitational drag away from that kind of performative hostility?
It's performative cruelty. It should be. I mean, I like you, I thought immediately the hostile environment and how deplorable it was. And this is sort of it dialed up to 11. And I know, and we both know what the backdrop is, which is that Labour is mortally terrified of reform, and Starmer's Chief of Staff, Morgan McSweeney, is driving the party ever further to the sort of hard-edged presentational and policy kind of strategy on this. But, the problem is that I always think that it's wrong to leave the immigration terrain to the right, not say anything about it. That's wrong.
Yeah.
But I don't think you should get into a contest to see who can be nastier, because the truth is that reform will always be nastier.
Yeah.
And so what you have here is, and it is shameful, actually. There is it's a word not to be used very often, but to see Yvette Cooper, who I know to be a person of decency and strongly committed to human rights and liberal, all the liberal values you'd expect of a long-term Labour politician of her generation, reduced to this is very sad, actually, and doesn't augur well for the strategic lifespan of this government.
Also, the thing that, I mean, as in any sort of competition, if you like, of who can demonstrate their cred in this regard better, it ups the ante for reform.
Of course,
reform say, oh well, they've been smashing down doors. What are we going to do? Right?
I mean, what they'll say is, well, they've done an advert, but the numbers are still fill in the blank. And it gives reform now absolute license to do that, because the government can't say this is a deplorable and kind of incitement to racial distrust and so on, as it might have in the past, because it's now joined in. I'm afraid it's joining in the battle.
Do you know? As an analogy, I don't know why this has just sprung to my mind, but it was one of the dumbest things that the marketing department of the Daily Mirror, when I was working there decades ago, said, we're going to hammer the Sun because we're going to make it 10 pence, right?
Yeah.
And we did this huge, big marketing campaign, 10p, and the Sun was 20p or whatever. And nobody seemed to think, well, what would happen if Rupert Murdoch said, well, we'll make it 5p?
Yep.
Which he did.
Because he could afford it.
Because he could afford it. He said, all right. Well, so, every time you get into a fight with a thug, you'll get battered. And that's what Labour's coming to. That old saying about don't wrestle with a pig because you both end up dirty and the pig enjoys it. That's what Yvette Cooper is wrestling with a pig now.
That's exactly right. I mean, if I was Farage, who has far too much good luck for my liking, actually, I would be thinking, this is amazing.
Yeah. They've moved the agenda towards reform.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Pete, thank you. Excellent question. We agree. Laura from Vienna. Fantastic. Hello, Laura. Guten Morgen.
Good morning.
Thank you both for an intriguing and educational interview with Parmy Olsen. Parmy was talking about AI, bringing me up to speed on the subject of AI. Exactly. What did the Mats think of Google's Eric Schmidt when he introduced the prospect of AI being misused by a latter-day Osama bin Laden figure or a rogue nation state? Interesting question.
This was Eric Schmidt talking on, I think, Thursday morning to the Today programme's Amol Rajan, and it was actually a very interesting interview because Schmidt has been involved in tech for a very long time, and this was quite a strongly worded intervention by him because he was saying, he said lots of things, but as Laura said that AI, I think interestingly, and this rather meshes what Parmy said in her interview with us last Monday, is that I understand why people worry about AI becoming conscious and the Terminator and all that, but actually the really important thing is to ask who controls it. Now, one way of looking at that is who owns it, who are the corporate actors. But I think what Schmidt was trying to say was, but what about if a bad actor, a rogue state or a terrorist got hold of it? And it doesn't have to be, by the way, it doesn't have to be Osama bin Laden. It could be a white nationalist terrorist. I mean, it could be anyone. And I think that this is a really important it's good now to be having these conversations rather than, as with social media, after the horse has bolted. There are so many ways in which a terrorist could exploit AI. The obvious worry is fake imagery, propaganda. I gather that some of the terrorist groups are already using chatbots for interactive recruitment. So we talk a lot about, so-called lone wolves, but imagine if they're on their laptops, talking to an AI that knows how to respond. That's a danger. And then, the kind of things that Schmidt talked about, the battlefield use of drones, biological weapons. And, we know that Hamas, Hezbollah and ISIS already have drone technology. And so I do think it's a massive concern, and it's not alarmist to say that. What's pointless is to fret about it after the fact. Now is the time for people to look at it in a very considered and thoughtful way and think, well, how can we best control it? I don't have an off-the-shelf answer, I'm afraid, but it is really important.
I think one of the most, it's that there are those sorts of obvious parallels with modern day terror, like battlefield use and recruitment and so on, but it's the idea that it can infiltrate a national infrastructure, shut down.
Absolutely.
Imagine if you're Kim Jong-un. Is it Un or Il? Where are we on?
We're on Un, aren't we?
Un.
Il is now no longer ill.
Il is longer.
Kim Jong dead. Kim Jong not still alive.
Kim Jong-un.
He's an ex-king. He's pushing up the daisies.
We're not here next week, folks. We've been nobbled. But but imagine you're sitting there and it's a choice between, do I invest in a nuclear campaign project or do I invest in AI that could close down the energy of a enemy nation state? That's an interesting question.
Well, the absolutely relevant parallel is that in the late 80s, early 90s, as Soviet Union was falling apart and Russia was still in a terrible state, a number of what would then become FSB generals worked out that you could disrupt a country and its electoral processes by using hackers at almost marginal cost. We were all talking about what happens to the nuclear stockpiles, and that was a good question to ask, don't get me wrong, but they were ahead of the game. Now, you're absolutely right. The battles ahead will be all to do with cyber warfare.
I remember Thatcher talking about You know, the analogy with Hong Kong.
Yes.
Where she was saying, you know, everyone was saying, oh, well, you know, the Chinese might take it over by military force and all of that if we don't give it up after the lead. She said, forget all that. They could have just turned the water off.
Yes.
You know, when a nation has control over infrastructure, you're at their mercy.
Well, I mean, you know, go back to the Middle Ages. How were sieges won? By starving and people into submission.
I must say, I had to take Eric Schmidt as the messenger with a pinch of salt because... You know, never mind a latter-day Osama bin Laden. I'm worried about AI being misused by a latter-day Eric Schmidt.
Well, I think there are a few of them at the inauguration.
Well,
you
remember Eric Schmidt was the chairman of Google in the early days, and Google's motto in those days was "Don't be evil." And I always thought, what kind of company needs to say "Don't be evil"? Right. Well, anyway, Google. So they had this motto, which they've now abandoned completely. Course, yeah. They've now abandoned any pledge not to allow their AI operations to be involved in the development of military supplies and so on and so forth. So, you know, Eric Schmidt as the moral high ground holder, do me a favour.
Well, I mean, think of Elon Musk, who is the biggest federal contractor in the US, particularly with supplies to the Pentagon, who this week or next is going to take his team of teen madmen into the Pentagon.
Yeah.
Now, that does not inspire confidence in me.
Absolutely insane. Well, let's take a very quick break and we'll come back with some more questions in a moment or two. Welcome back, dear listeners. I hope you're enjoying your Sunday morning. Hope you're enjoying this podcast. Next question, please.
Oh, this is definitely a good one.
This is one for me.
It is, and the world. As a regular listener from Liverpool, but a lifelong Evertonian. Ooh, it's a bad start. I'm keen to know how Matt Kay felt on Wednesday night when James Tarkowski volleyed the ball into the top right corner of the net to secure a draw for the Toffees in the last ever Goodison derby. Well, John Paul from West Derby.
Well,
over to you, Matt.
Well,
absolute scenes, eh?
It was absolute scenes, and I'm going to tell you this, and it may surprise John Paul, it may surprise fellow Liverpool fans. I think it'll definitely surprise Evertonians listening. I absolutely loved it. I thought it was the perfect end to Goodison derbies. I don't think you could have orchestrated it better.
What, the fight or the...
No, not the fight. The fight was just... That was just a
It was like something out of Brookside. It was amazing.
Scouse melee at the end. That was great. The crowd were involved.
It says nothing good about me that I found it very amusing.
Arne Slot got sent off.
Yeah, you
Curtis
come here.
Corey got sent off.
Four red cards, wasn't it?
4 red cards in the end. And funnily enough, my mates in Liverpool were on the WhatsApp channel saying, and one of them said, have a bet on red cards because there's one coming soon. So I don't know if they did. I hope they did because there was 4 at the end of the game. But my point is, now all my family are Evertonians, right? All my immediate family. I've got.
I don't think I appreciate.
I've got a cousin. I've got a wonderful auntie Sheila who's an absolute Evertonian. My dad's an Evertonian. Sheila's son Kevin is an absolute mad Evertonian, but Kevin's son is a Liverpool fan, Tom.
Yes.
And this is not unusual at all. And maybe it's hard to describe. Maybe it's not the same in other cities. And I'd love to hear from people. It's definitely not the same in North London, Arsenal and Spurs.
No.
But there is a great affinity, and it's not wholly true. There have been times when I've been at Everton matches where I've been called obscene things by Evertonians in front of my kids. Actually, you know, like horrible things where they can be very nasty and bitter about stuff. But that stadium has been in existence for 130 years.
Goodison.
Yeah, Goodison Park.
And this was the last. Can you explain to
for non-football
footy fans?
This is a stadium that's been in existence for 130 years. It's half a mile from Anfield. So you nowhere else do you get this extraordinary intensity of combat and competition as you do in Liverpool. And this was they're moving to this wonderful new stadium, Bramley-Moore Dock, which looks like a spaceship has landed on the Mersey. Right. It's incredible. And this is the last game at Goodison. And Goodison is like the old Highbury Stadium, like La Bombonera in Buenos Aires, the home of Boca Juniors. It's a ramshackle, falling to pieces stadium that literally rocks when the...
Oh, really?
Oh, my God, you know. It's like... some parts of it you feel for your safety because it feels like it's going to collapse. but it's full of atmosphere, and I'd be very interested to know how that atmosphere translates to the new stadium. But this on Wednesday night, Everton scored early on, then Liverpool scored 2 great goals and were 2-1 up, and then in the 90th minute, because there'd been injuries, there was I think 9 extra minutes.
It was 98th minute, wasn't it? Something incredible.
This guy, James Tarkowski, scores, I think it's his first ever goal for 100 games. In 100 games. Scores a goal
heart-stopping last-minute goals,
like Messi. Comes in, runs down the left, the ball comes knocked onto him, volleys it, nearly bursts the net. The crowd erupts. I mean, the roof comes off Goodison. They go and celebrate in the corner. They are swamped, never encouraging pitch invasions, right? But if ever there was like a moment where you sort of thought, well, obviously that was going to happen.
Yes.
Players and supporters hugging each other in the corner, going wild. And then the 21st century curse of football excitement, VAR kicks in, but makes the whole thing even more intense.
Of course, yes.
You've got this 2 or 3 minute wait where they're checking, was it offside?
Yes.
No, he's not offside. Was there a foul on the Liverpool defender, Konate? Adjudicated not to be. The goal is given and the place erupts again. And I know...
That was when the punch-up happened, was it?
Then the whistle is blown. One of the Everton players, Decore, goes over to the Liverpool fans in the corner.
And Mr. Curtis Jones took exception.
Curtis Jones becomes my whole new footballing hero, comes over, throws Decore to the ground, is given a second yellow card and therefore sent off. Decore is given a second yellow card, therefore sent off. Arne Slot comes over, says something to the referee like, that was the worst game I've ever seen or whatever. Is given a straight red card, sent off. His assistant is given a straight red card. Absolute scenes.
Sounds like a good night out.
It was can you imagine going to, people deride sport, but can you imagine going to a theatre and leaving a theatre with those emotions coursing through you?
I find it very hard to imagine. I'd love the idea.
So, mate, here's the
Ray Fiennes coming on, say, come here and
knocking Judi Dench to the ground.
You think you're hard enough, it certainly, it focuses the mind, yeah.
But
maybe that's what theatre's missing.
I definitely think some spectator involvement on that level would be great. But I just think that the most perfect end to it really is that, well, one thing, I'd feel a lot differently if we weren't still 7 points ahead in the league.
I was going to say, you do so from a position of
from
grandiosity.
I can afford the magnanimity.
Looking down upon
but the nicest
the poor
thing,
toffees.
The almost godlike thing about it, I think there's been I think I'm right in this, there's 110 derbies have been played in that ground.
Wow.
And Liverpool and Everton have both won, I think it's 40.
Oh, really?
41 of them each.
So
that draw made it absolutely level pegging between those two great teams. They're both great teams.
But so much ahead. Yeah. So much excitement to look forward
to come. But as the doors close on Goodison Park, if you'd have sat down Aaron Sorkin, David Mamet, James Graham and
Vince Gilligan,
and Alan Bleensdale and said, write the script.
Right at the end.
That's what they would have written.
Yeah.
Next question,
and then had
please.
A big fight.
Anna from Newcastle says, enjoyed listening to your discussion of movies last weekend. I'm a bit dismayed to see the main choice this weekend in my local multiplex is Bridget Jones 9 or Captain America 12, or is it 13? I've lost count. Why so many tedious franchises? Matt, this is your bag.
It's a very good question. The truth is that movies are far too dependent on these big franchises. The Captain America film, I happened to be looking up this morning. It's the 35th in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
You serious? You're not exaggerating.
No. It started out with Iron Man in 2008, and this is the 35th, and they've been, let's put it politely, of variable quality. Bridget Jones, not quite so many, but the answer is that the whole business model of cinema is rickety at best, and I completely share Anna's sort of frustration because you do go to the multiplex and there are 3 screens showing Fast and Furious 19 and you think, is life worth living? But the way to look at it on the bright side is that the multiplex revolution happened because if you show if 3 screens show Fast and Furious or Captain America or something you don't like, that cross subsidizes the screen that shows the minor movie or the we were talking last week about Casablanca being around.
Yes,
fantastic.
yes, yeah.
And the theory at least is that cross subsidizes the ability of cinema chains to show the art house movies, the independent movies, the rep movies from the past.
Yeah.
So that's why. And it is frustrating because sometimes you get to the cinema and there's literally only stuff that has been going for 20 years in various sequels and so on. And it can be a bit tedious. But I think that at the moment, cinema's just about back on its feet since COVID, just about.
Yeah.
Lots of independent cinemas closing, very sadly. Prince Charles Cinema in Leicester Square, one of the great cinemas in the country, is facing closure, which is awful.
By the way, folks, if you are a cinema fan, you live in London, you probably know the Prince Charles.
Sign the petition.
Yes, there's a petition. Google the petition. Sign it. It's a terrific
it's a great
cinema.
place. There's no cinema like it in London, and maybe the UK in the sheer mix of cinemas, movies it shows. Anyway, the bottom line is, you're right. Bridget Jones' Captain America, not a great weekend for movies, but if lots and lots of people go and see those 2 films, and I think they will, that means that the cinemas have a chance of showing The Brutalist, Conclave, things like that.
Do you know, I am amazed by I've got no idea, maybe you do know, but the economics of a multiplex cinema, because they're so huge. They must cost a fortune to rent. They've got staff, enormous heating costs. And now that they've all got these lounger seats and everything, even the massive screens might only have 60 or 80 seats, and they're selling them for $6.99 or $7.99.
Well, some of them. I mean, there's as they say, dynamic pricing.
Right.
I mean, the more expensive showtimes and seats can cost you 12 to 20 quid. I mean, you're lucky to get out of Everyman with change from 20 quid.
Right.
So there's that, but also, cinema. Really, this happened in the late 90s, early 2000s. There was a move from the old cinemas where there were at most 2 screens, maybe one downstairs, one upstairs, to this isn't going to last unless we chop up the building into lots of little screens. And the problem is, and I'm sure we've all been in this situation where you go in and there's like only 2 or 3 people, and that doesn't work. But the theory at least is that the tentpole movies and the franchises keep the flame alive, so you can watch the more interesting stuff.
Okay, viva
and
Captain America,
fingers crossed is all I can say.
Anna, thank you for your question.
Right, love your work, Matt. But Matt Kay, that's a shocking Aussie accent, mate. As an Australian English teacher, happy to help out, but supply my rate sheet for tutoring and voice actor work. Dr. Mark Barnish.
Well, all I can do is apologise. I knew as I was doing it, it was terrible.
But
it sort of devolved towards Wolverhampton. It started out Sydney and
Dr.
then
Mark,
ended up Wolves.
It's just like I can see. One of the great things about this question is that because it's from an Australian, it's done with a bit of piss take.
Well, you say
serious.
that. I did.
You think it's?
I did. No, not from Dr. Mark, but I did get one email from one listener who said, "Why are you mocking Australians?"
Well, that's a silly question.
And I thought, well, I'm definitely not mocking anybody. I was hoping that there was a spirit of frivolity.
Yes,
was as far as I'd go.
Yeah, but, I mean, I think. Look, life is about progress, not perfection, Dr. Mark. Right, and what I can guarantee, knowing Matt, is that next time the Aussie accent's going to be even better.
Even better, Cobber. What's your favourite colour, blue?
What's your favourite colour, blue? And in no way stereotypical.
What's your favourite pastime, sport?
Yeah, and I mean, the answer to the question, why are you making fun of the Australian accent? I mean, the answer is in the question, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry. If anyone feels out there that was a microaggression, can I just read out?
It was a macroaggression.
It was a macroaggression.
Fuck you.
I'd like to, first of all, we're in a new age as well, so stop whinging. Yeah. And secondly,
grow a pair.
I'm sorry, okay? I'm going to go off and educate myself with Antipodean friends of mine And I'd like to do a land acknowledgement before we close. Is that enough?
Mark, thank you for your good-natured adjustment of my attitudes towards
Yes, tolerance is good.
Australian
Tolerance.
And that is it for this week.
That's it for this week. Got it.
Flew by.
Time flies by when you're mocking other people's accents, doesn't it? Isn't it amazing?
The good thing about mocking Australians is that they're so far away they can't get hold of you.
Are you sure? I mean, have you been to Earl's Court? Have you been to
Earl's
Earl's Court recently?
Have a wonderful Sunday, everybody.
Enjoy your Sunday, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Don't forget our subscription
Oh,
offer.
don't forget subscription.
£1.
Pound.
For all the journalism you can consume in 1 month. It's nothing. So sign up to the New European. Australians welcome especially. Send in your questions for next Sunday's episode Q&A to 2mats@tnepublishing.com. And thank you to our production team from Rethink Audio, led by the great Matt Hill.
Thank you.
Bye.
And have a good day.